Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Eco Show. This is number 10, and I am the host. My name is Henry, and we talk about news and new research in ecology and eco-related things. For the show, we start off with an animal of the week, and then we talk about research. And then I talk about news and ideally, some good news in the environmental space and things like that. So, welcome if you are new, and if you've been listening to it, hello, and thank you for coming back. Okay, the animal of the week this week is the giant panda. So I don't know why the panda popped to my mind, but I felt like learning a little bit more about the panda this week because it's a cool animal, but it's not one that I don't really know much about any animals, is what doing this animal of the week thing has taught me. Is you definitely have an emotional connection to different animals and the ideas of different animals, but I don't really know much about them. So, and there's a lot to know about pandas, let me tell you. I was not expecting to learn all of this. So, starting off with some easy things that you probably knew. It's endemic to China, which just means it's originally from China, and it is in the Carnivora order, which is the classification system for different species. And that order, as it implies, sort of is talking about things that'll be eating meat, but the panda is actually a folivore, which means it eats foliage, and in particular, it eats bamboo. But as we'll find, it's pretty strange that they eat bamboo. So folivore means it eats leaves. Bamboo shoots comprise 99% of its diet. And I think the top of this microphone does make me congested because just when I've started now, I'm starting to feel the sniffles. Come on. So I need to figure out what that's about. But warning, sniffles are incoming. I can sense it. They will occasionally eat grass, tubers, birds, rodents, and carrion, but that's pretty rare. And they'll eat a wider variety of foods if they're in captivity. They mainly live in Sichuan mountain ranges in China. Let's put an image of where that is here. And I should have already put an image of a panda. I should have put a hand up, but here's a second hand for a funny image of a panda that I don't know what it'll be yet, but it will be interesting. Okay, it mainly lives in these mountain ranges, and it used to live in lowlands, but it has been driven out of lowland forests by deforestation and development. It is considered conservation reliant, which means that it relies on conservation efforts for the population to be stable and ongoing, in particular with habitat protection, I believe. It has been recovering slowly. There are 250 pandas in captivity, and there's approximately 1,000 to 3,000 in the wild, but that's an estimate. So that's not a lot of folks left out there being pandas. This was interesting. I had heard that pandas were related to raccoons, or were like a type of raccoon. I don't know if you've heard that, but apparently that is false. DNA has showed that it is a true bear, and in fact, it is the most basal member of the classification called Ursidae, which is the classification. I'm not sure if it's order or what level it is, but that's talking about bears. So in the genetic classification, it's the most basal member, which means it is up at the top, which I'm not an evolution guy, but it means generally that it is not a branch off of other bear types. So it's not like there was a grizzly bear and then the panda bear as a species branched off of that. Ursidae is this group which includes all bears, broke off of something, and panda was towards the top of that break-off point. Break out. And let's see, what else have we got? It has been recovering. It is Ursidae. The name panda is from French, which is possibly from ponya, which is the Nepalese word for the red panda wrist bone. So very specific. Leave it to the French to name them in that way. But the origins of the name are unclear. There are many different names for it in Mandarin, like mole, which is in English spelled M-O, and Da Xiong Mao, which means giant bear cat. Except in Mandarin there are tones, so I've probably pronounced it incorrectly. But giant bear cat is a pretty cool name for a panda, and I think kind of captures their vibe pretty well. They can be 1 to 2 meters long, which is approximately 3 to 6 feet long, and they can weigh up to 160 kilograms, which is over 300 pounds. So males will be up to that weight, and females will be around 70 kilograms. So males are quite a bit bigger than females. This was cool as well. Their coat, so the black and white coat, is thought to camouflage them both in snow and in shadows. So you can imagine how a panda in the snow, you think of snow as being, or I would think of snow as being, a white expanse. So the black in a panda seems like it could be, seems like it would make it stick out, but actually it might make it blend in from a distance because it can look like shadow and snow, and you can imagine how in shadows that black could make it hard to identify. They can live up to 20 years in the wild and 30 in captivity. They have a thumb-like bone. Ooh, this is a cool image. Remembering to put up an image. They have a thumb-like bone and 5 fingers to hold bamboo. So they've got 5 fingers, plus imagine a bone coming off. And that bone is there to help them hold bamboo. So they have been eating bamboo for a long time. Now this is the wild part about them eating bamboo. They still have a carnivore digestive system, so they don't get that much energy or protein from bamboo. So carnivores have usually very short digestive systems, but animals like gorillas, I believe, even though I'm not sure of the length of gorilla intestines, but gorillas eat a lot of foliage, and they can extract a lot of good stuff out of foliage. But pandas don't. So they don't get very much energy or protein from bamboo, and they eat a ton of it. They eat 9 to 14 kilograms of bamboo a day, which is, I think, will be around 20 to 30 pounds, which when you think about it, for how big pandas seem, I would think they would actually eat more than that. They have lived in bamboo forests for millions of years, so that's why they've got the funky bamboo bone. And they avoid steep hills and social interactions to save energy. They poop 40 times a day. They may be pooping 40 times a day because they eat so much of this bamboo and it just goes straight through them. And they're not, you would think after millions of years of eating bamboo, they would sort of get a digestive system that would make them do better, but that's not how evolution works. Evolution works like you get a mutation, and then if that mutation is beneficial, then it'll be passed on, but they have not hit the digestive mutation lottery, so they've been out here eating bamboo for millions of years and pooping 40 times a day. It seems like it must be a constant flow pretty much. And they eat 54 to 66 milligrams of cyanide a day, and that goes out through the pee. So I don't have a good idea of how much is I don't know how much is a lethal. Let's see, what's lethal dose of cyanide? Oh my gosh, my search history is ruined now. Lethal dose cyanide. I'm just speaking while I'm doing it so there's not dead air. Okay, so a fatal dose for humans can be as low as 1.5 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. Okay, so per kilogram. So I'm about 100 kilograms, pretty thick. So that would mean it would take 150 milligrams of cyanide to kill me. So I guess I could eat that much cyanide, apparently. Possibly, maybe. I probably wouldn't be feeling very good, but it looks like I could eat 54 to 66 milligrams of cyanide and survive. I'm also going to search, I'm adding to that search, lethal dose cyanide panda. So that if there's anyone watching, that might sound worse now. It might sound like I'm trying to poison pandas. Okay, cyanide, pandas. I'm Googling now. Pandas, cyanide, bamboo. So, I don't know if this is going to be helping me out or worse. See, there's a Verge article now that says, don't underestimate pandas. Their bodies can neutralize cyanide. And I clicked on the link and now I'm scrolling through it. So, whoever's looking at my search history, don't worry, I was just curious about pandas. Okay. The last little bit of information about pandas are that they are solitary and they just meet up to breed, basically. And so because they get so little energy and protein out of bamboo, that's, at least in the Wikipedia when I was reading about it, that's why they're seems to be fairly antisocial, is because it takes a lot of energy to do social interactions. So, and they're getting such poor nutrition through bamboo. But they've been doing it for millions of years, so hopefully they can continue to do that. Okay, I'm going to put a new hand sign up to myself which is gonna be this sign, and that's gonna mean I finished that section. So hopefully I see that, so I can put a timestamp in at 15 minutes. Put a timestamp in for everyone who wants to skip animal of the day and get straight to research. So if you skip the animal of the day, you missed out on some information, but welcome to this section where we're talking about research. And we have a special feature from Restoration Ecology titled Young Voices and Visions for the UN Decade of Restoration. I think I probably didn't read the journal correctly because there weren't really that many articles that seemed to fit that title, but there were lots of good and interesting articles nonetheless. The first article was titled Inclusive Restoration, 10 Recommendations to Support LGBTQ+ Researchers in Restoration Science. That was by Trevyn A. Toone, or Toone, and his pronouns are he/they. And motivations for this research is that time in the field can be dangerous, particularly if you are LGBTQ+. In certain areas, it can be unsafe to do this, and there was a need identified to have recommendations for how to better support folks to make it a safe space. And I think I'm going to go through. So they had this really nice image in this, and they presented 10 recommendations for LGBTQ+ inclusion based on 4 guiding restoration principles. So this article was in the Journal of Restoration Ecology, and I liked how they tied this idea of support into restoration principles. And those principles are that context is key, was number 1. Number 2, healthy environments require support. Number 3, success needs to be defined. And 4, a diverse future is worth striving for. So I thought that was a really beautiful way of connecting this in. So those are 4 guiding restoration principles. And they have 10 recommendations in this great image here that I'll put up here, probably over my face, actually. And I'll read through this now. And so if you're listening to this, we have an image that is showing a progression of trees from shrub to bigger and bigger and bigger. And they are connecting these recommendations to what you do in restoration, which is sort of what you have to do at the start of a project towards the end. So under that first idea of context is key, they say, I need to zoom in here because it is a little small for me. Let's see. Is that going to help me out? Yes. Okay, under context is key, please, we have some recommendations, which are to learn about LGBTQ+ identities and communities. That's number 1. Number 2, accurately define gender. Number 3, use LGBTQ inclusive language. And so that is under the idea of context is key. So that also sort of relates to developing your own understanding of these communities before you can work in any sort of capacity to help make these safe spaces. Under this second group, and my understanding is super basic, so I'm not trying to be teaching or anything here. I'm just summarizing this article. The article is also super great to read. And under this second restoration principle, healthy environments require support, the fourth and fifth recommendation, the fourth one is develop LGBTQ plus field safety plans and develop LGBTQ plus identities in research and reporting. So oftentimes when you're doing research out in the field, you have to fill out a safety plan, and it's often a very kind of a tedious process to put together, and you're talking about potential risks in the field and things like that. So a part of this developing field safety plans is being able to incorporate this idea in there so that that can be a part of making sure going to the field is safe, and including LGBTQ plus identities in research and reporting can relate to when surveys are being done, that these identities are being included in how reporting is being done. Under the third principle of restoration, we have the sixth and seventh recommendations. The sixth is support the full diversity of the LGBTQ plus community, and the seventh is value representation as an outcome. So those are two specific definitions for what success can look like, that you want to support the full diversity, you're not picking and choosing or prioritizing some over another, and that representation is valued as an outcome. So that is something that is important. And under the last restoration principle, number 4, a diverse future is worth striving for, we have the last 3 recommendations. So 8, 9, and 10. 8 is improve access to nature for LGBTQ plus individuals. 9, address barriers to education for LGBTQ plus students. And 10, support LGBTQ plus leaders as role models for the next generation. So that is speaking to that in order to get to a place where there's a sustainable system where people are being brought into the space and being safe, that you need to support people, to have people to look up to, and to have the resources to be able to get into those spaces in the first place. So each one of these recommendations could have a whole section of different things to do, and this is definitely a bird's eye view overview, but that was, I thought, an important article in this journal. And we'll move on to our next paper now, which is, and I'm going to put my hand here. What hand am I going to do for putting the figure down off of my face? I'm doing hand over the face. Oh, that's good. If I'm putting a figure over my face, then that's going to be close it. Oh, that's good. Actually, that's great. Open hand. Put up a figure, close hand, take it down. Maybe close hand. Yeah. Something like that. Okay. If you're listening, I am having a conversation with myself in the video form with how to make this easier to edit, because I usually edit this on my phone and you're scrolling through the time ticker to get to where it is that you want to. I put in images on the video version. So if you are enjoying this, check out Eco Show on YouTube. and you can see the visual version. If it's hard to find it on YouTube, it might be easier to find it on Instagram to begin with. On Instagram, it's called ecoshowpod. That's the handle, all one word. And then all the links are in there. And make sure you like and subscribe if you're interested in seeing more. And if you're not, then don't do that, because then they probably will show you more. So be sure not to do it if you're having a bad experience with this show. But leave a comment if you are. If you are and you feel comfortable and you're having a bad experience, please put a comment in, because I don't have any comments on these. So it'd be nice to have something to read. Ideally, constructive criticism. Because if I get too many mean things, then I would stop reading them. But that's not a problem that I have in the luxury of having right now. Okay, our next article is titled 10 Years to Restore the Planet, a Seedy Situation. This is by Bianca Berto and et al. And they talk about 5 methods for seed enhancement technology. So restoration is very important to do over large scales, and one way that you can do that is by shooting out seed all over the place, and that covers areas better than what you usually think with restoration is you grow a seedling and then you plant it in the ground, but you can't really do that very easily over large areas. It's a lot easier to just shoot seed out there, but oftentimes when you're doing that, things are less likely to take as well. So they talk about 5 technologies to enhance the ability of seeds to get out there and be alive. And the first one is priming, which involves, I just read these before. I should have this in the tip of my mind. Priming, I believe, had to do with hydrating and then drying them out so they're just about ready to pop out of the seed. That's one possible priming technique. So you get the seed, so you can get a whole batch of seeds into a state where they're just about ready to come out of the seed. Another thing you can do is, so that was the first method. Second method, coating. An example of that is putting capsaicin, which is like hot sauce, over your seeds so that they won't be eaten by things that want to eat seeds, because that's an issue. If you're spraying a whole bunch of seed out there, things like to eat seeds, so put a coat on it. Give it a nice wool coat. I don't think wool coat is an option, but think outside the box. Number 3, extruded pelleting. So that's mass producing pellets with seeds in them, so they've already got a little substrate to start growing from when they're shot out. Flash flaming, this was an interesting one. So apparently for grass seeds, they may have little hairs on them, and these hairs can make them clumpy and maybe difficult to distribute, they make sort of clump together. But if you flash flame them, which is like the name says, just quickly exposing them to flame, that can burn off these external hairs and make them easier to move on their own and make them more easy to distribute. And yes, there are some grasses. There are lots of endemic grasses that people want to bring back in places. So you may not think of grasses as a restoration thing. Usually we think of trees, but there are things that we want to put out there. Think about like prairies. If you're trying to restore a prairie, you may want to get some diverse grasses out there. And the last one is doing an acid digestion, which can help get things to the point where they're ready to come out. So if you're a methods person, this was an interesting article to check out. Cool ideas to think about. I wanted to include that because that's something, this is one I need to come back to. So I need to read research for my own work each week. And so reading this journal was like doing some of my own work, which was really good. So I'll need to come back to that one. There was another article that was about climate change impacts on forest success of forest species that are being planted in restoration sites. And that's pretty much what I'm doing for my PhD. So the results weren't very interesting, but I'm also saying that so that I remember that this was in this one. But I'm not actually, I'll say the title of that one so that if anyone wants to look that up, they can. We still have a lot to get through. So much thing in so little time. That was titled Trees Planted Under a Global Restoration Pledge Have Mixed Futures Under Climate Change. Okay, I feel I'm speaking fast, so I don't want to speak as fast, but I do want to get through more quickly. Let's see. So I'll summarize some of the other articles a little bit more succinctly. The next, how many more we have? We have a few more research articles to get through, people. It's interesting. Let your mind be expanded by these ideas, and then we'll get to good news. The next article is titled, did I say that last one? I did. The title of the next article is Understanding Anthropogenic Impacts on Zoogeochemistry is Essential for Ecological Restoration, and that was by Andrew J. Abraham et al. And the main idea of that article is that it's important to understand the impact of your restoration action on the essential elements and chemicals that are in the environment. So if you are introducing bison into a grassland, bison is the go-to example. If you're introducing bison into the grassland, you're introducing compaction to the soil because they're going to be pressing down the soil, and you're going to be introducing cow dung from them. So that's going to be changing the physical and chemical composition of the landscape. So I like this article because it put an emphasis on really being aware of those big core impacts like the physical environment and the chemical environment and what restoration may do, because if you're not incorporating those things, then you're bound to do some silly things. So good on ya, Andrew Abraham, for that one. Our next article is titled UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, Key Considerations for Africa, and this is by Mlungele M, Nsikani, and that is pretty straightforward. This article is talking about restoration in Africa and that it needs to be prioritized, and the considerations that they had. I believe there were 6 key considerations, and this was et al., so there were other articles, is that effective oversight and governance needs to be relevant to Africa. So the conditions in Africa are not the same as every other place in the world, so oversight and governance of these restoration projects need to be relevant. You can't do a one-size-fits-all thing. Goals need to meet African context, which is saying similar things. And what else? Making the case for restoration amid multiple development demands. So it's important to have the message out there and to get this across in a way that is relevant in a space where there's also a lot of demands. socioeconomically. So these all are similar. These are based around really getting at that you can't just go out there and start restoring things. You need to look at the bigger picture. And as I'm looking over the other recommendations, they all sound they have sort of similar sound. So the next recommendation is growing an African restoration community of practice based on regional need. The next one, collaborating to improve restoration outcomes. And the final one, establishing an Africa relevant evidence base for restoration. These restoration efforts should incorporate poverty alleviation strategies to improve livelihoods and mobilize community support. So like we've seen with so many success stories about biodiversity or ecological success, you need to get the whole community involved. And historically, besides there's been the historical overuse is not the right word. The right word would be complete disrespect and taking advantage of Africa by other countries, particularly white colonial powers. And that is still ongoing, but there's also a sheen now of white saviorism, I guess, in going and trying to fix the problems, but they often end up creating more problems. So this speaks to the need for the solutions to these problems to be for the community and by the community in many ways. Our next article is titled, How Does Forest Restoration Affect the Recovery of Soil Quality? A Global Meta-Analysis for Tropical and Temperate Regions by Adriana Allek et al. And the answer to that question, how does forest restoration affect the recovery of soil quality? They found that it does recover physical and chemical qualities more rapidly than biotic qualities. And as you go on in time, this gets closer and you have better results appearing in what spaces? You have better results appearing in places that are tropical. So, yes, forest restoration positively affects recovery of soil quality, and chemical and physical recovery is quicker. If you're a ecology restoration research person, this is a big global meta-analysis, so the things that they say are pretty simple, but this is a nice article to read more in depth and to probably put into a literature review or into an introduction section, because when you want to make statements like that, articles like this are really nice. But you have to read it, you have to make sure you're agreeing with the statements there. I'm giving a little wink, but you need to you need to read it. You can't just use things as references without reading the article. Okay. All right. The last research article, I believe. Oh no, there's two more, but they're quick. I'll get the quicker one out of the way first. Invasive weed-based biochar facilitated the restoration of coal mine degraded land by modulating the enzyme activity and carbon sequestration. And that was by Deepita Ghosh. And that's pretty much all I'm going to say about that one, is just the title, that this weed-based biochar facilitated restoration of a coal mine. So I want to put that in there because it's nice to see mines getting restored, and cool to think about different ways that people are doing that. So they're using a weed-based biochar, which is, I'm not too sure to be honest, but it is, and I shouldn't say anymore because I'm not actually sure what that entails, but I like the title, and that the title was very straightforward. And our last research article, can remotely sensed vegetation patterns signal dryland restoration success? And that is by Yanning Chu. The answer is yes. Remotely sensed vegetation patterns, so they were using drone high-resolution imagery to take a photo of restoration projects on dunes, and then they were on the ground and surveying success of restoration on the ground, and they found a relationship there. Oh, and I'm going to put an image up here that isn't really talking about how they were remotely sensing, but it just shows a nice image for how dunes are restored, because each environment is different, but we don't often think about dunes as getting restored. But here we see state 1 active dunes, which means the dunes are moving. It's a harsh environment with low vegetation. And then the transition process, which is often facilitated by restoration. You're planting plants that stabilizes the dunes, and then at this last state 2 is a environment that maintains itself and facilitates high vegetation. Close image. Cool. All right, that actually did just make editing a lot easier for me. All right. Now on to the good news. There's 29 species taken off the endangered species list in Australia. That includes 15 mammals, 8 birds, 4 frogs, a reptile, a fish, and including this is the eastern barred bandicoot and the western quoll. And those are 2 cute little mammals that are great to see off of that list. Next good news article. I don't mean to rush, but my phone can sort of barely process making this into a podcast if it's pretty much at this length. The next good news is that cockatoos were added to list of non-human animals that use and transport sets of tools. This has only been reported in chimpanzees before, and this was in Goffin's cockatoo, which is from Tanimbar Islands archipelago in Indonesia. And they can recognize a job needs more than one tool and come prepared. So it's not like they're trying multiple things at once. They can see a problem, realize they need multiple tools, and they go grab those multiple tools, and bring those tools back to solve the problem. And so that's apparently the second animal that's been realized to do that. Pretty cool. Some good news from the United States, which you love to see some good news from the United States, because it's so easy to see bad news all the time. But there's lots of good ecological good news. Get involved with making some good news happen. This good news was that monarch butterflies rebound again, beating last year's total. So overwintering sites in coastal California were surveyed. California is on the west coast of the United States. Put an image here. And I'm going to close it. We don't need that much California. There were over 300,000 individuals tallied, and this is the normal range from 2000 to 2017. This is the normal number of individuals tallied over the wintertime. In 2020, there were only 2,000 that were surveyed. I'm not sure if there's an issue with it being the pandemic or what, but that, and I believe possibly the year before, there was a couple of years of it being extremely low. So it's great to see it come back. And if you're in California, you can help monarch butterflies by planting native milkweed, planting local native nectar plants, and you can help tracking these monarch butterflies. So you can see if there's in your community any tracking efforts going on. And if you're in another place in the world, you can check and see if there is a rare insect around you that maybe you can plant a plant and it will help it out. Okay, last two good news pieces are tied to each other. There was a New Zealand school strike for climate on Friday. Very cool. They're out protesting. I didn't see the final figures of how many people were out there, but they had specific demands, which included, I believe it was, I have 4 here, but I think there was 5, and I'm pretty sure the last one was getting subsidies for electronic bikes. But their main demands is no new exploration for mining of new fossil fuel resources, no new exploration or mining of new fossil fuel resources, lower the voting age to 16 years old. I was like, yeah, lower it. Here especially, I believe you can join the military when you're 16 here. So there's a number of things that you can do when you're 16 that sort of make it make sense. I would be interested though, because I think there's sort of an assumption that if you lower it to 16, that you'll get more climate positive voting, but I think everybody should be able to vote. Lower it to as low as possible. And what's the next one? 30% marine protection by 2025, and support regenerative farting, and support regenerative farming. And that's a nice one. I think there's a lot of symmetry between the help and support that farmers and food producers can use and need, and what is beneficial for the climate, and aligning those two together is super great to see. So that strike was on, and awesome for doing that and getting that going. And the last piece of good news was that there was a global treaty on oceans signed recently, and so that is great to see, and that ideally could actually connect in with that 30% marine protection by 2025. And this global treaties on ocean is to protect 30% of oceans, and I believe in particular it's talking about the high seas, and the high seas are comprise about 2/3 of the ocean, I believe. So this treaty is to protect 30% of that for species, and to have limited, if not eliminated mining and fishing, things like that. I'm not actually sure what that 30% entails. It needs one more step to be ratified, but there was a big agreement on that, so that was beneficial to see. Okay, that's going to about do it for this week. I hope you have had a great week and that everything is going swimmingly. Thank you for checking in, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.